of avoiding some of the most expensive mistakes that food startups make. And it's the 5 most expensive, the most egregious, and it's basically based upon my experience. We'll talk about that in just a second. And we'll also talk about how to avoid them, which is what you really want to know. And basically, this webinar is for those with an idea for a food business. So in the aspirational stage, those who are currently selling their food products, maybe at farmers markets or even in a couple of local stores. And by the way, it's also for not just food. Now, this also applies to beverage. It applies to small goods, health and beauty aids, supplements, basically anyone who wants to learn how to avoid these mistakes, because within the CPG, consumer packaged goods world, basically all of these things apply. So who we are? Well, first of all, Deborah, who you just had adjusting things at the beginning here, has 10 years as a business educator. She was training manager of the Entrepreneurship Center in the Bay Area. She has worked with over 100 entrepreneurs in helping them launch their business, created training programs and curriculum that have helped to launch over 100 businesses. She's a certified coach in the International Coaching Association, as well as having worked as a certified SBDC advisor in Northern California. And me, I'm G. Stephen Clear, the retail sage. I've spent 30 years helping brands succeed in retail, founder and the managing director of Trade Marketing Incorporated for over 20 years, a San Francisco-based retail marketing agency, working with brands like Nestle, Hostess, Schering-Plough, Van de Kamp's, Good Earth, Tetley Teas, Cliff Bar, Dryers, Clorox, Conagra, El Monterey, and dozens of others. But I've also worked with a number of startup brands in the last few years. Make a Stand, Brew Broth, Hip Chick Farms, Sprouted Minds, Two Chicks Jerky, and I'm also certified Northern California SBDC advisor working with CPG companies. So we're talking today about the 5 most expensive mistakes, and basically based upon work with startup companies, and by the way, with some larger companies who've made some of the same mistakes, we're going to talk about the top 5, the bad guys, and how you can avoid them. Number 5, drum roll please, is basically a lack of industry knowledge. Now, amazingly enough, because a lot of us are foodies, or a lot of us have a mission base, so we've got a little broader based look at our industry. I'm still amazed by the number of people who don't really understand how the industry they're going into works and why. So in order to combat that, in order to get a better understanding, get an education, the first thing you can do is you can join associations and trade shows. There's a lot of them related to food production. There's ones related to health and beauty. There's all kinds of things out there that are organizations and structures put together to help you understand more about the industry you're going into. Food Marketing Institute is one of the big ones. There's the Fancy Food Show, which is the Specialty Foods Association. That's both East and West. There's also Expo, East and West, that we've just talked about. NOSH. What's important about these? Well, in outreaching and trying to gain membership, most all of them produce a daily, if not weekly, newsletter. They also do news feeds. They do webinars like we do. They produce white papers, and all of them are very relevant. They're based upon the latest information and what's going on. And it's a great way for you to get a free, I might add, education about what's going on in your industry so that you can avoid some pitfalls and also just get a better idea of what the trends are. The next best place, and I find this to be amazing because I see companies, big companies do this too, get an education, spend time in the store, or as I call it, the battlefield tour. You want to check out your competition. So if you have an idea for a product, or you have a product you're selling in farmers market but not in stores, what does that category look like? What do those products look like in stores? Start out in a conventional. Let's just say you're doing ketchup. You go into an Albertsons, you go into a Safeway, you go into any of the larger stores, and you look at what the ketchup section looks like. Well, first of all, it looks mainly like Heinz and Hunt's because they basically dominate the section. But look up at the top shelves. That's where you're going to find more of the specialty products. More of the products are brought in by distributors, and you're going to see some different stuff there. You're going to see more different stuff and less of the big guys if you go to upscale and independent stores, because that's probably where you're going to be. You really don't need to go look at the dollar store if you're going to be selling an upscale ketchup, but you want to see that. So, okay, they probably got a couple of Heinz and a couple of Hunts, but they probably have Sir Kensington's too and some other players. On the other end of the scale, you also want to avail yourself of going to like Costco and Sam's Club. In Costco, you're going to have the 4-pound bucket of ketchup, right? So, but you want to see who's there, and you want to see if it's conventional. Is it flavored? Is it no added sugar? What's going on? And then last but not least, the world's largest marketplace is Amazon. And if you go in and search for ketchups or no sugar added ketchup or organic ketchup or whatever it is that your product line fits, you will find a product, you will get a product search. You can go to that product search, the company page. But when you go to the individual product pages, you will see lines, 3 lines down, right, of like products, recommended products, Amazon's choice, whatever, which should start to give you a full picture of that category. By the way, go to more pages, right? Go to other products, and you'll find, again, 2-3 lines down, you see all these different products. You can get a pretty good view of your category in a very short period of time. Spending time in the store specifically, you want to look at your competition's price points. Okay, so if on the top shelves, and again, ketchup, I'm not talking Hunts and Heinz here, I'm talking up at the top. So for Sir Kensington's is $6.99 a jar. All right. And your price point for your product is $10.99 a jar. There better be a real good reason why there's a $4 price difference. You want to look at sizes offered. This gets critical when you get into retail. So what do you want to look for? Sizes. Well, again, if everything within that category is in a 12-ounce jar or 14-ounce jar, and you're packing in an 18-ounce jar, that's probably not a good idea. You probably want to get in some type of alignment. You want to look at the various types of packaging, glass, PET, what's available there. And again, if everything is packaged in nice round bottles or stand-up bottles or whatever, you don't want to pack yours in an octagonal glass cut bottle. Take a look at the flavors. All right, very important to look at what's being offered out there. Is there ketchup with, again, no sugar? Is there ketchup with sriracha? Is ketchup with lime? What's the current trends that are appearing on the market? Look for those new products. And last but not least, a great place for education is the clearance racks. Most stores have them. They tend to be at the back, but go look and see what's on the clearance rack. If the ketchup with sriracha lime is there, then guess what? That's a discontinued product. And that probably is not the product you want to try to bring to market because somebody else has already done it and it didn't work. So another way to get education is to learn from experts, attend webinars like you are now, a great move. You can also listen to podcasts. I happen to host one on a weekly basis, which is made up primarily of fellow entrepreneurs in the food business. It airs on Thursdays. We'll talk about that in a minute. You can also take courses. Getting information from people who've already been involved in the business. If you work in an incubator, even if you work in a commercial kitchen and stuff, you can talk to other people that are working in the kitchen with you. If they've been in the industry a few years, they probably have tidbits of knowledge that you can, gain from. Number 4, drum roll, please, is time management. And you might be thinking to yourself, time management, what does that have to do with like an expensive mistake? Well, time is money, as they say. And here's the good news and the bad news. The good news is as you're building your business, you're going to get more orders. And the bad news is you're going to get more orders. And the problem is, from a physical standpoint and a financial standpoint, these things basically go in opposite directions. So the more time you're spending on sales, the more orders you get, the more time you have to spend on production. All right. The more orders you get, the more money you have to spend on production. Time management becomes critical, particularly if you're solo or a small team out there, because as you grow, this business tends to grow exponentially rather than arithmetically. So in other words, you don't go from 2 stores to 6 stores to 8 stores. You go from 2 stores to 50 stores to 200 stores. And each one of those creates gaps that you need to be able to fill. So what can you do to avoid this? Well, first of all, look at automation. If you can automate some software, for instance, for inventory management, or your books, QuickBooks, or other things that you can do that basically can take care of things. You can automate by getting equipment to do your filling for you, by getting certain tools or pieces of machinery that you can add to the line. Think about where you can add to your team, or can you outsource? So I work with one client where we have a goal, which we've met so far, but I know it's a stretch, of basically taking one thing, one responsibility, and outsourcing that as she can afford it every month. And so far, 4 months, we've outsourced 4 different things. It's working. You might not be able to do that at the same speed, but at least if you have it as a task, you can avoid a time management crump. What processes can be batched? So in other words, if you have stickers, let's say, and you have stickers and you need to put stickers in your package, if you can put the stickers on prior to the fill, it saves time. It's just one of those things. What can be done in batches so that you don't have to keep going back and doing things? Are you doing 4 hours twice a week at the kitchen? Well, can you do 8 hours in the kitchen instead of the 4 and actually make that more efficient because you only have to, clean up once, you only have to set up once. Also, what can you do for general time savings? And a lot of people kind of forget this, but there are other things. And I think Deborah brings up the thing of, could you get a housekeeper? How much time do you spend cleaning around the house? A housekeeper might make some sense, maybe cheaper to hire than another production person that you need. But it's generally looking for what type of time savings are going on out there. The other great thing about being in this business is there are tons of other companies in the business, and therefore there have been tools put together and machines put together that can work basically for a lot of you out there, and it's already there. Numero 3.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you please repeat it?
Numero 3, packaging. Thank you. Thank you, Siri. Siri, we'd like to know what the number 3 mistake. Oh, it's packaging. Okay, so why packaging? Well, it might seem benign, but packaging is anything but, okay? First of all, let's understand better the role packaging plays, not just in transporting from the store to home, but also transporting from your production to the store. Packaging is critical because it needs to fit on the retailer's shelf. If the retailer's shelf in your category is 14 inches high and you have a 16-inch high jar, it's not going to go on the shelf. They're not going to put it on there. Packaging is critical because it educates the consumer. Now, with everything we do, advertising, social media, public relations, all this wonderful stuff, more than 80% of your consumers will see and hear about your product for the first time by walking by it on a retailer shelf, or possibly by seeing it on a page in Amazon. Either way, the only thing it's talking to them at that point is the packaging. And so it is simply just critical. And there's also some legal requirements we'll talk about in terms of packaging that, help this a little bit. It's a huge cost. That's one of the reasons it's one of the most expensive mistakes, because you have to invest in packaging. You have to invest in design. You have to invest in purchasing. You don't have a lot of flexibility. Once it's done, it's done. And there are many of you out there who have eco considerations in your packaging, therefore making that choice a little bit harder and, of course, a lot more costly. So the best practices to avoid mistakes in packaging is to keep it simple. Remember that 50% or more of your packaging graphic is actually dictated by regulation, meaning you have to have your product name on there, your flavor description, your nutritionals, your ingredient statement, your best by date, your corporate address. You have to have your non-GMO, all these other things on there that you're going to have. And basically, by the time you do that, you don't have a lot of stuff to move around. Go with the flow. Take a look at what's, again, going back to the education store. Take a look at what's going on in your category. Take a look at what kind of colors are out there. And you can make some choices about this. You can go contrarian. So you can take a look at, for instance, what Right Rice did, which is they looked at, ready-made rices and Rice-A-Roni and all the other stuff out there. And they went, wow, there's not a black package out here. Let's put it in black, which, by the way, was a total non-starter for the food industry for years. So go with the flow, look at it, derive if you can, because it's just easier. Last but not least, in the best practice area, do not over SKU. If you are unfamiliar with SKUs, SKUs is short for stock keeping units, and it means one individual size flavor of a product, the individuality of it. A lot of people who are involved in food get into different tastes, and so they come out with 7 different flavors of their ketchup. Well, the world doesn't need another 7 flavors of ketchup right at this point in time, but they probably need your 2 or 3 that are really the best and are really going to cut through. So remember, just try to keep it down. It keeps costs down all the way around. You want to provide variety for sure, particularly if you are a fast-moving consumable. So in other words, if you are a single-use product, an energy bar, you can have more SKUs. If you're ketchup, not so much. Number two, Siri, do you want to chime in? No. Okay. Number two is pricing. And pricing is so critical. The impact on the growth of your company and, of course, on your profitability. Knowing how to price is critical. And there are a dozen different ways to get to a price, if you will. You need to know your cost of goods, your cost of sales, very important. And you need to know all the pieces in the pie that come along with that. And what I mean by that is people who are going to be involved in the process of getting your goods to stores and to consumers. So that includes distributors, brokers, the retailer themselves, all of those things. And because you control, if you will, the pricing initially, your wholesale pricing, it's critical that you get that right. So look at market pricing. Again, when you're doing your research in store or online, take a look at what the prices are in the category. What do they range from? Where do they go? How many players are there in that plus $10 ketchup area? Any? One? Two? All right. You've got to look at that. You need to look at your fair profit. And again, there are people who will tell you a certain amount. It's a 30% margin. Oh, you need a 50% margin. Oh, you need 100%. Well, you need the margin that the market will bear is basically what it comes down to. And you can look at it as you're probably going to be in some ways subsidizing when you initially start with a launch. Why? Because your cost of goods are probably going to be so high that you aren't going to be able to really take a quote unquote fair profit and still keep the price that it ends up on shelf within reason. But you're going to be able to deal with that down the way because you're going to, of course, make your production more efficient. You're going to reduce your cost of goods and whatever. There is a trend, and it's happened with a few companies and a couple of people that I've talked to for the podcast that come from the tech world and have borrowed one of the things in the tech world, which is a little problematic. And that is that they actually put together the pricing of the product based on market pricing, and they ignore their cost of goods and literally tell investors that you're going to be subsidizing us because we know that we're going to lose money on every unit we sell, but we can't really test the validity of the product if we put it out in the market at a 30 to 40% premium over everything else that's on the shelf. Who's going to buy this? I don't need to get it down to Hunts and Heinz, but I need to be competitive with Sir Kensington, because if I can't see that, it's not going to work. That's interesting, something new within our industry. But it's really important that you get your wholesale right. Undercapitalization is number one, numero uno. In the past 5 years that I've been doing specialty work with smaller companies and startup firms, this is the number one most expensive mistake, because either it results in the company going out of business or it results in the founders having to dilute a lot of their equity in order to raise money to keep things going. It sinks the most ships, as I like to say. Cash flow is critical within the industry. There are, again, if you look at how the industry works, usually if you are producing in a commercial kitchen, of course, you pay the rent on that up front. You pay for all of your goods up front. You get around once, twice a week. You're making the product. You put that together, box it, get it out. Your distributor may pay you within 30 to 45 days. Your distributor nowadays may also have you on consignment, not unusual, meaning you're not going to get paid until the distributor gets paid. And now we're talking about 90 to 120 days down the road. So supporting capital to support cash flow is absolutely just necessary. Remember that scaling takes money. So if you're trying to make your company larger and you're trying to grow the business, what we call scaling rapidly, you are going to run into gaps. And the gaps are basically illustrated by this. You're currently buying your vanilla, right, in quart jars to put into your recipes. Your next level of being able to buy vanilla is going to be a 5-gallon pail. That's a big jump in your production. Your next jump is going to be a 55-gallon drum. If you go to a co-packer, nice guys as they are in business to make money. And believe me, they've heard all the great stories and seen all the wonderful products before. They've seen it all, and they've gotten burned. So what they do is they basically require 100% or 50% upfront to even begin to talk to you about doing your production. Secondly, have realistic financials. And realistic financials is basically having people on your team or someone you can go to who can look at what you are projecting in terms of costs, in terms of your sales, whatever, and be able to say, hey, I don't think this works. Working with me, I have clients who put together pro forma budgeting for asks for basically fundraising for investors. And they will put together, this is the explanation of what they're going to spend the money on if you write them the check, the investor, right? I will look at a pro forma budget and I generally will put a 2x or 3x against it, meaning doubling or tripling the money they're asking for. Why? Well, because it's very uncomfortable to go back and ask again if you find that you need more. And most founders, most entrepreneurs don't really have a realistic idea of what the costs are going to be going forward when they scale. And so they under ask. Do you have to be constantly in a fundraising mode? In general, yes. Unless you come from, a family of money or something, you're going to be constantly looking for money because you're going to constantly need money in order to grow. It's just one of those things. And then follow the money. And by that, I mean, you can help avoid undercapitalization by looking around and seeing what firms are doing out in the marketplace who are raising money. Again, on all those news feeds and stuff we talked about in the beginning and the daily types of information that you can receive, there are ones that talk specifically about what companies are raising money, how, and most important, how much. So again, if you're in plant-based right now, plant-based is hot. Look at what some of the people out there are raising. You're saying, well, why are they raising 120 million? I only saw 2 other things in the store. Well, they're doing that because they've looked at the path going forward and they know they're going to need 120 million. And that's why they're trying to raise it. In fact, they were probably trying to raise 200 million and 120 million is what they got. So again, the 5 most expensive mistakes, food startups and how to avoid them. Let's just recap. Number 5, lack of industry knowledge. And again, something that can be avoided by basically getting out there in the trenches and taking a look at what's going on. It should be a daily practice. It is for me. It always has been. I'm very interested in it. I want to see what's going on out there. And luckily in the age of the internet, that's become way easier than waiting for some trade magazine to hit my doorstep. Time management, absolutely critical, particularly the smaller you are, or if you're a sole entrepreneur, as you grow, your time is just going to get stretched. And, you're going to have to account for that. Also, that time management stretch is, adding to your team and thinking about how you're going to do that. Not necessarily hiring, but thinking about how you're going to add people to that. Packaging is critical because it's one of the most expensive things that you buy, purchase, have to commit to in the beginning. And there's so much that can go wrong with it. And people who go through package redesigns, it's just very costly and there's usually no reason for it. Tends to be stuff that could be avoided right in the beginning. Pricing, number 2, because pricing has such an impact on every sale you make. And if you get your pricing upside down, if you don't have your margins right, or you don't allow for a margin for your distributor or a commission for your broker, or know that your retailer is going to mark the product up by quite a bit, you're going to be way off base and your sales are going to reflect that. And last but not least, undercapitalization. Absolutely critical. So, if you're going forward, you need to be thinking about that, and you will need to be thinking about it as often as you're thinking about new flavors. So we'd be happy to take some questions at this point if some people have some.
Yeah, we have a few.
Okay.
So the first one is somebody said they were planning actually on walking the expo.
Oh dear.
And they're not there. But what should they be really looking for when they're kind of walking those shows instead of just kind of observing? Is there any particular things they should be observing?
Wow, there's so much to see. The basic idea in terms of, if you're an entrepreneur, and again, I'll just go back to ketchup, but substitute, whatever your product is in for ketchup, is you want to go see the other ketchup producers. So if you can get a hold of exhibitors beforehand, an exhibitor's guide, or, we grab one when you first get to the show, sit down and figure out where your competition is, figure out, and even if they're not competitive, if they're kind of within your category. So if you have a sugar-free, non-GMO, whatever ketchup, and you only got probably 2 or 3 competitors out there, but you want to go see them. I think it's also a great venue for seeing packaging, different types of packaging, different types of approach. What are people using? And most entrepreneurs in the booths or whatever, if you have an interest in their packaging and how it got created, they'll share with you a lot of stuff. It's a really great way to do it. And last but not least, remember, walking those same shows are buyers, category managers. Sometimes, you know, I followed a group from Whole Foods around for like an aisle and a half one time at, you know, because I just wanted to kind of overhear what they were talking about, what they were looking at. And last but not least, investors go to those shows as well. So you can do a lot of, a lot of reconnaissance, if you will, at the bar afterwards, you know, at the show, because everybody kind of hangs out at the same place. So, yeah.
Oh, good. Another question on the fundraising, the money under capitalization part.
Yeah.
So is it totally unrealistic to think you can bootstrap?
Wow. Okay. So the answer is no, it's not totally unrealistic, but you're in the minority. So if you can, again, if you have some means, if you have some money you can get a hold of, and you are willing to be patient about your growth, I do know people who have successfully bootstrapped to a pretty good size, but I don't know many. So it's one of those things that it's a real anomaly for people to be able to do that. The speed at which you scale or which you grow is critical in that equation, by the way. So, you know, I work with people who they have a 3-year to 5-year horizon, and they want to be out of they have an end game figured out. Well, if you're doing that, you got to be pretty quick. So you're going to need more money. I have other people who are less concerned about that in terms of a timeline and more concerned about maintaining the amount of equity in the business and, you know, going forward. And some people are even hyper sensitive about it. But as I try to remind them, 10% of nothing is nothing.
Okay. Those look like the two main questions we have.
Great. Well, I appreciate it. If, by the way, you have any further questions, you come up and say, oh, you know, I wish I'd asked that. By all means, you can contact both of us, Steve at kitchen2shelf.com. That's kitchen, the number 2shelf.com, or Deborah at kitchen2shelf.com. So we'll talk a little bit about what's up coming up. So, well, actually, yesterday, but coming up again on Tuesday, Kitchen to Shelf, Deborah does her 2-Minute Tuesdays. Great little tips and hints and actually a little bit of homework for you to do, right? And what was this week's was we started
talking about teams. So,
yes, teams. Yes, very important.
Yep. And so the 2-minute to do is to look on LinkedIn at teams for companies that you admire.
There you go. That's awesome. The Next Level Brands podcast is coming up tomorrow, and my guest is going to be Steve Caldwell of Swiss Rosti. What's a Rosti? It's a Swiss product that basically is a crispy filled potato, and they are incredible. They are on fire. Steve is just, this thing has taken off like crazy. And you say, well, wait a minute. Everybody's on keto, right? Or we eat stuffed potato. Just, if you get in a store near you or buy them online, these are just absolutely amazing. So that's part of what's up. Next webinar, Deb.
Is on the Living Business Plan. Let me stand up so I feel like I'm a little bit in echo here, which is kind of a working plan based on the business model canvas. So it's something that you can use, that you can put in front of you and start planning ahead.
And that's going to be coming up Wednesday, April 1st, 11 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Mountain, and 2 o'clock Eastern. What's up? Ready for Retail. The Ready for Retail online course is still in production, but it's much, much closer. So the 8 classes that we did for the pilot have expanded into over 32 modules. So it's taken us a little bit longer to get through it than is possible, but there's some really good stuff in there, and your feedback, especially thanks to you guys who were involved in the pilot, there's going to be some awesome stuff in there. We're going to be talking to you more about that next month for sure. And last but not least, okay, if by the way you need some assistance, you're looking for some help in growing your business, 2 resources. Kitchen to Shelf is our educational arm. There's classes and coaching available there. Launchpan is coming up soon, Ready for Retail. The master class spring of 2020, and that's going to be with some of you we've been working with going forward. And then also startup and growth coaching packages are available. At Next Level Marketing, if you're doing more than a couple of million in business a year, we have distribution plans. We can help you, a marketing review for your overall business, new product launches, or general food and CPG business planning.
And there's other thing on there too, is Steve does for a few companies, and I think he has one spot left right now for VP, fractional VP. He does usually one or two people.
Yeah, if you'd like to learn more about, so this is basically a fractional VP of marketing, fractional VP of sales. It's where you may need at this point a little bit of that industry experience, but you don't need it on a full-time basis. You just need to get things in row. By all means, reach out, contact me. We can talk about it. There's no obligation. And
I think that's it.
I think that's it. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next month and hopefully listen to the podcast tomorrow. And it's a lot of fun. Swiss Rosti.